Hi, everyone. You're listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM, Pittsfield, with Roberta McCulloch-Dews of the Mayor's Office in the city of Pittsfield. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we have with us Megan Whilden, Executive Director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Berkshire Community College, better known as OLLI. And beyond her work with OLLI, many know Megan for her pivotal work as the city of Pittsfield's first ever Director of Cultural Development, a role specifically created under the administration of former Mayor Jimmy Roberta. And under your tenure, Megan, you founded Third Thursdays, co-founded the 10 by 10 Festival, and won the first ever Creative Community Award from the Commonwealth. So we have a lot to talk about. So welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
It's wonderful to see you.
And thank you for hosting this podcast. It's such a wonderful idea. You know, I think it's so important that we have to keep telling stories about ourselves as a community to ourselves, to remind ourselves how creative and smart and committed and diverse we are.
Yes.
So I commend you for this program.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you. So let's start with a little bit of background about Megan, because Megan is well known to a lot of folks, but I never like to assume. So for those who may not know, OLLI is an organization that provides non-credit, non-graded courses for individuals ages 50 and older. And for those who also may not know, OLLI is not a standalone. So it's not something that is just, specific to the Berkshires. It's actually a part of a network of fellow OLLI organizations, which are embedded in colleges and universities across the country. And there are also 3 other fellow OLLIs in Massachusetts. And so Megan is a part of this wonderful organization that is really creating mental stimulation for so many of our, I don't want to say seniors, because I feel like 50,
When I first started, I had to think about language and all kinds of things, because that's how I approach things. And I realized that, that if I were to pick a term, I'd say older adults. Yeah. But generally, I would just say people.
Seriously. Yeah, I've done the math, and 50 isn't far off for me. So, I'm like, I'm not ready to put myself in another category. No. But Megan, for so long, you have embodied all things Pittsfield. But Pittsfield is your beloved adopted city. You are a 5th generation Californian. You were born in Oakland, and you were raised in Monterey, where your great-grandfather was mayor.
Yeah, sometimes I forget about that, because I have been involved in politics recently and civic engagement and stuff, and then I'm like, oh yeah, there is kind of a legacy of my family getting involved in issues and helping to make a community better and so forth.
Did you guys ever talk about that?
Well, not so much my great-grandfather, but certainly my parents were both, both of their positions, they really focused on helping people.
That's right, because your father was an attorney, and he was involved with the Native American community, right? And your mom actually had a really interesting role. She was like a Zen priest.
She is, but she didn't become that till after she retired. She was a social worker for probably over 30 years for the county. And then when she retired, she became a Zen priest.
How cool. Now, I have to ask, because you have deep California roots. Joan Didion just passed. Did you ever read any of her work?
I'm not sure if I have.
That's okay. I remember reading Joan Didion in college, and I don't know if I fully appreciated it back then. So I actually kept a lot of the books that I had from college, and I found Slouching Towards Bethlehem, and I'm starting to read some of her essays again. Definitely really interesting prose, but I think I'll do some more. And if you get a chance, The Year of Magical Thinking.
Okay.
That's a book that she wrote after her husband died, and it's a really great book. So I had to ask, because I know that was just in the news, and you go way back in terms of your California roots. So that was just an interesting fun fact.
Actually, the last book I just read, which actually I finished this morning, was 2 short stories by Octavia Butler, who was also a Californian. She was born
Yes.
in Pasadena.
Yes.
And she was a groundbreaking science fiction
That's
writer.
right.
And I love her work. It's
That's
scary.
right.
It's kind of scary, her work, and very prescient.
I feel like I do have an Octavia Butler book at home. There are a lot of books that I want to read for 2022. I made the commitment for 2021, and I am going to really be committed. I think we all have our list coming up. But let's get into your story.
Sorry.
So the fabulous Megan that we see today, the woman who has contributed so much to the city of Pittsfield, you were honed and shaped by a pretty amazing journey. So I want to talk about that. And I think we have to go way back to the 80s and 90s so we can figure out how younger Megan, honed her craft, right? And so I think going back to that time, the national landscape, it was ripe with a lot of issues, social and economic issues, and unrest in many forms. And in 92, you moved to D.C. and you worked for the AIDS Action Council. And if I have it right, this was an organization that was centered on advocacy toward really getting policy in place to support Americans who are impacted by AIDS, right?
Education, research, and treatment.
Right. And I mean, going back to that time, I feel like there was a lot of misinformation. Fear was still rampant. I mean, we were living in a time where, we had situations like, was Ryan White, was that like the late 80s? I'm thinking Ryan White.
Yeah, the Ryan White Act had already passed,
yeah,
I think.
Right.
That was a real turning point.
That was a turning point, and I think people realized, okay, let's, the views were shifted nationally. But you have often credited the work at this council as sort of serving as a foundation for your future endeavors. How so?
Well, I think that it was the national advocacy arm for the AIDS network across the country. And one of the things that was really interesting, actually, about AIDS was because it was striking people who were prejudiced against, basically LGBTQ men in particular, they had to sort of take care of themselves. So they formed AIDS organizations all over the country. They ran their own fundraisers. They advocated for research. They educated each other. And then we, networked them all together to make, national change. So I think that idea of power coming sort of from the bottom up, so to speak, or from the people impacted, was really powerful. And then on the other end, I coordinated what was called the National Organizations Responding to AIDS, or NORA for short, and it was over 160 national organizations that didn't have AIDS as their main focus, but were concerned about it. Everything from the the American Hospital Association to just all kinds of different groups.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of collaboration and working together to make things better, and I think that is always so important. You can't do anything alone, really.
That's right.
You always need to work with others.
It seems like this was a really big undertaking. Did you have a team, or, was it sort of like a grassroots effort? What was the scene like back then?
Well, we were kind of the suits of AIDS,
okay,
so to speak, because we were the lobbyists. So we had, people that would go to Congress and meet with senators and stuff. And, if you met with a liberal senator, some Congress people would totally understand, yes, this is a disease we need to have stopped. Others might not have that same approach, and you have to think about what will move the needle for them, what will inspire them to support good policy. And often it was financial. If you don't work to prevent AIDS, it's going to overwhelm your hospitals. I'm just thinking now how relevant that is to our current situation.
Right.
And a lot of people that worked in AIDS, when COVID came, it was like, okay, here we go again, kind of thing. Different, but a lot of similarities.
Right. Yeah, I can only imagine that, being able to hear the yeses, but then there's also the no's, right? And managing that. And did you feel like when you left you left work and you went home, where did you put all of that? Because that's a lot of heavy stuff.
Yeah, well, and at that time, actually, my mother and my sister were also working in the AIDS sector in different ways. My mom, through social work, she ran the program for people living with HIV, and she would, she was always very creative in a very grounded way. So one of the things she did with the funding was she would buy, like bark loungers for people living with HIV, so they didn't have to stay in bed, but they could come into the living room and still kind of recline, but hang out and not feel so much like a patient. And the other thing was, this is way back when, cordless phones, so they could, they could also talk. So just very simple things to just improve the quality of life. And my sister was in England at the time, and she was also working for a local AIDS service organization that, we didn't kind of put it all together until I think probably at a Christmas or something. It's like, 3 out of 4 of us are working in the HIV realm.
Yeah, it was a hard time. It was a hard time, but we've come a long way.
Yes.
And now we have COVID in front of us, and we have new lessons to learn and continue to learn. So a lot of good people doing that work too. But while you were in D.C., Megan, you were doing this deeply transformative work, but you also said that from your observations, D.C. was also very segregated. Was that something that you saw just in the midst of coming and going? How did you come to this realization?
That's a great question. I'm not sure exactly, but but I was always aware of it because DC is like 75% black. Yeah, and
they actually called it the Chocolate City.
Yeah. But then there's the one wedge of the city that's white. Yeah, and it was very strange to me. And actually, when I worked in DC, I was working in HIV, which is challenging. Yeah. And the working in a city where there was such segregation was challenging, and just working national politics was challenging. So I decided that each year in D.C. was like 7 normal years.
Right.
So it was, so after 3 years, I knew that if I didn't leave, I'd end up staying. Yeah. And when I left, actually, I just didn't. I think about politics at all for a while. So I think I kind of go back and forth with, an intense focus and then, stepping back a bit, especially in that realm, which is true also for the past, 4 or 5 years. Yeah. I co-founded the Four Freedoms Coalition and was active in the Berkshire Democratic Brigades. And this year I'm kind of taking a year off.
Well, I think you have, looking at your career, you decided to make the switch. You left politics and then and then embraced your creative side. And so, you've actually dubbed yourself a creative instigator. I like that term. I really do. I love that term. But and so leaving politics, you went on to hold some really interesting positions. You were an associate publisher of Parabola magazine, a market editor, marketing manager, and marketing director. And so you really got into more of this creative side. Was that intentional?
I think that is I think that's my sort of, since I was a child, I like to make art and be creative, and that was sort of my label. I was the spacey, creative, smart girl in the family. Yeah. So the arts are always close to my heart. But I remember in high school, I started getting into punk rock. Okay. And but I couldn't sing. I'm a terrible singer. And I couldn't play any instruments. So I'm like, I'm going to be a band manager. That was my goal at
Who
the
did
time.
You manage?
I didn't end up doing it. But it kind of, it's about supporting
Right,
creatives
of
too.
course.
So when you look back at what I've done by marketing and communications around the arts and literature and so forth, that's what I've been doing, is kind of lifting up and supporting other creatives, which to me is a creative thing.
Absolutely, because the creatives need that support to continue their work. There always has to be someone on that back end pushing everyone forward. And speaking of just one of your particular roles, so when you were at IS 183, you were in the marketing director role. And you also became friends during that time with an artist named Maggie Mailer. And I feel like for those who know sort of Pittsfield lore, and the rest is history, as they say. But for those who don't, please explain how you two became friends, and then talk a little bit about the Storefront Artist project.
Sure, yeah. So Maggie Mailer grew up in the Berkshire. She is the daughter of the late Norman Mailer, and she was living in New York City, and then after 9/11, basically, she decided to move back. And she moved back to the Berkshires, and she was looking around North Street, and at that time, North Street had many, many empty storefronts, many more than you see now, many that have been empty for decades. And coming from New York City, where artist space is at such a premium, it's very, it's hard to get, it's expensive, the apartments are small in New York and so forth. She was like, wow, all this space, wouldn't it be wonderful to put studios in it and have it be a... Have the storefront window be a semi-permeable membrane between the creative process happening in the studio and then the rest of the world. So before that, a lot of times people would put artwork in storefront windows, but to have the actual studio itself there was a really new and interesting idea. So she literally put up one of those little pieces of paper with little phone numbers hanging off, tear off phone numbers. At IS 183, and I think that's how I met her. Yeah, and at that time I was just moving from South County to Pittsfield, so I'm like, well, this is a really cool idea. I want to help.
Yeah.
So I became one of the earliest kind of instigators for Storefront Artist Project.
Wow. And so in your role,
but she has all the credit.
She has all the credit. Yes.
And she negotiated with the different building owners, and most of them said, well, nothing else is happening. Sure, we've tried everything, but why not? If you take care of the utilities, that's fine. And it was all, I always remembered the story. So this is before then, of attempts to kind of reinvigorate Pittsfield. And one summer they put up a big banner that said, "It's happening in Pittsfield," and everyone was just kind of rolled their eyes and said, so you can't just, you have to have that mix of the bottom-up creativity as well as support, to make it, make more people know about it. You can't do one without the other.
I agree. I mean, I think, being a part of the administration and understanding that well, I mean, you are a part of it, so it's always that balance, because the work that goes into so many things, but I think overcoming the persistent sentiment, right, that maybe has just languished for so long, it can be a challenge. It can be a challenge because it can be hard to move from that place. And I think the work that you were a part of with that project, it was pivotal. How long did that last for the Storefront Artist Project?
I think it lasted about a decade.
Gosh.
It kind of it morphed and became different because it was also successful. In that it did reinvigorate downtown, and then the storefront started to be rented. And
that kind of put the Storefront Artist Project it's almost like the job was done. Right.
Well, the job is never done. No.
Well, Megan, believe me, I know it's not done. But at the time, with the storefronts, I guess, being filled up, it's almost like the job of the artist to get the attention, to create that vitality. It's almost like unless those artists stayed permanently, where would they go if the businesses started to come in?
Well, that's an excellent point. And so what happened at the time was there were several buildings with upstairs. There was also a glut of empty office space, and just space in general. So a lot of artists then, liked being downtown. They liked being able to have coffee with each other and see each other and have a community. And so they moved upstairs. So several of the buildings on North Street then were, kind of warrens of artist studios.
Oh, wow.
The Wright Building, but it was a little bit, hodgy-podgy.
Well, I mean, I think, obviously, when you think back to that time and you think about just the work, in terms of just today, those artists, have they morphed into groups like the Asset for Artists Project? Like, do you know if it's sort of morphed into that? Like, what does that coalition look like today? Where do they exist?
That's a great question. There's always been the Berkshire Art Association. That's been around for, at least 30 years.
Yeah.
I think that they, kind of went back into themselves.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of artists tend to be sort of introverted and need their alone time.
Right.
So they found spaces and, kind of... So it's, it's hard in the Berkshire sometimes to...
Well, let's talk a little bit about 2005, because in 2005, that's when you became the city's first ever director of cultural development. And, we know that you put several initiatives into motion. We mentioned that at the top of the hour, from Third Thursdays to the 10 by 10. When you got into that role, and of course, knowing that the mayor at the time, Mayor Roberta, he was a big champion of the arts. He had gone away to big cities. He had seen that, if you're going to have, people who are thriving, the arts and culture is necessary to be a component of a city that's on the go and on the move. So when you got into your role, did you have an agenda? Did you say, okay, I have the top 5 things that I want to accomplish? Or did you let things happen organically?
I am more of an organic person, but at the same time, I'm a gardener. So it's about, it's sort of, I think the way I operate is often I figure out why I did something afterwards, and it makes perfect sense strategically. But in the moment, I sort of act on what feels like instinct. But it's really based on, the sum total of your knowledge and experience and observation and so forth. So I did not have a list.
But you basically, so you didn't have the list,
that
but
I can remember.
But you saw the need and you were like, okay, we should do this. That's, and you did. And you did. One of the things that, let's go back to that, because if you had to pick one of your signature initiatives that to this day you look back and you say, yeah, I'm still really proud about that, which one would it be?
Well, I'm proud of all of them, but certainly Third Thursdays is, knock on wood, still happening, hopefully in 2022, which I think that'll be the 14th year. And what I'm really proud about around that is that means kids in Pittsfield and the Berkshires have grown up knowing that there was like this cool, fun thing you could do downtown every month in Pittsfield, and you'd see, people and there'd be like surprising performances, and there'd be food, and you walk around and so forth. So to have it transform the next generation's idea of what their town is like, I think that is really powerful.
I got to tell you, when we moved to Pittsfield, it was 2010, and I was pregnant with my third child, my daughter, and Third Thursday was my first. I remember, going to Third Thursday, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. And, we were moving, we moved from a small upstate town. We were there for work, and, coming from New York City, you're used to the hustle and bustle, the activity. So that was a departure, from that, and moving here, And seeing Third Thursday, I was like, this is great. I thought it was the most amazing thing. And the kids, every Third Thursday, they're like, are we going to the festival? And so I have to say, from personal experience, it was something that I enjoyed, my kids enjoyed. I think, obviously, the pandemic has disrupted so much, and so we don't know what 2022 is going to hold, but, hopefully down the road, we will see another, a return of Third Thursday in some form. I just want to quote something that you've said, because I think it's really, it's a powerful quote. You said, one of my major goals was to change people's perception of Pittsfield. You can't overestimate the culture of negativity that was here. I wanted to change the perception and the reality. If you only change the perception, you haven't really accomplished anything. So in considering that quote, do you think that you succeeded?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I think that, and I don't think it's I succeed. I think it's we succeeded, or we had success, and it's a continuing process. But if you think about, Pittsfield in 2002, 20 years ago, holy cannoli.
You're safe.
There was no Barrington stage here. The Colonial Theater was a store. There was no storefront artist project. There was no Third Thursdays. There was no 10 by 10. There was no, there was no festivals per se. I think even then the Pittsfield Ethnic Fair, which we had brought back and which was very popular in earlier decades, had not come back. There was no artists on North Street. There was no focus on the artists. All of that, and downtown was, very, very quiet, and there was just no idea that there could be more. So you may feel like it's, Pittsfield has a tendency to sometimes be negative about itself now, but it was worse. Right.
Well, I think, being able to share that history is important, because people forget.
I know.
People forget. And it's easy to see what's in front of you and say, how horrible is that? That's terrible. But when you have that collective history, you can actually say, well, it was worse. And you have that. And by you recounting all the initiatives and efforts that actually happened in that space of time, it shows that revitalization did happen and is still happening. And I always like to say that the best days for Pittsfield are still ahead. You have to be able to be positive, but also channel that positivity into actionable goals. And I think that's a work that sometimes may not be visible when you're in it. And not even to the people in the community sometimes, because they'll say, well, nothing's happening. But because you don't necessarily see the process doesn't mean it's not happening. So very, very, very important stuff. And thank you for that history. And in the words of Joyce Bernstein, she dubbed you Pittsfield's cultural czarina. So I guess you forever sort of have that title underneath your belt, but you left the you left that title and that role, and you went on to OLLI, and in 2014, and you became executive director. You were the second ever executive director of the organization. And you're coming from this highly creative, collaborative environment with this emphasis on the arts and culture. Some would say, what made you shift to this group? Because maybe the connection wasn't as apparent to some. What attracted you to OLLI?
Sure. Yeah. One of the first people that came to meet with me when I became the cultural director were two OLLI volunteers, actually Art and Mona Sherman, to introduce themselves and to let me know about what they do, and they invited me to give a program for OLLI. So I think what I did was a downtown walking tour. I'm not sure exactly what year it was, but I always kind of had a crush on OLLI. I just thought it was a really fascinating organization, and as someone who loves to learn and is endlessly curious and comes from a family of very curious people, so I always really enjoyed reading about their programs and so forth. And then after about 10 years with the city, I was kind of ready for possibly something new. And that
Right.
job opening came up, and I thought, yeah, that would be a really exciting change. And, Ellen Kennedy was president, and she'd been doing such great things with BCC. So I made the leap, and really it's not such a change as people might have thought, because in both cases it was like small office, big impact. There are just a few people working with many different organizations and many different, individuals and volunteers to create many different programs. So the variety and the creativity and working collaboratively with other people, it was all there. And there was a great opportunity also to grow it. At the time, the membership was dropping, and it was below where it was supposed to be. And the marketing was very low key. So, I started changing that around, and, we've grown the membership by over 50%, I think, since I've been there. And the programming has gone through the roof. So I've certainly kept it busy for me.
Listen, Megan, I went onto the OLLI site and I'm like, well, I mean, I know I'm not the demographic right now, the target audience, but it just looks so vibrant, so interesting. And I could see the Megan touch. I saw your touch. I'm like, the way you're able to make it so appealing to the person who's not even the intended audience, they're like, wait a second, what's this OLLI about? And you have part of your work, in addition to bolstering the membership, the collaborations are out of the box. Like you have a strategic partnership with One Berkshire and the Berkshire Innovation Center to establish the Tech Impact Forum. Okay, I wasn't expecting that to happen. I mean, honestly, that's an innovative thing. How did that come about? And was this part of your mission to really position OLLI as this, it's not the run of your mill, program for the retiree kind of thing?
Well, yes to all of that, but it was actually, it came out of, and that's what's so beautiful about OLLI is it was the idea of an OLLI member, and it was actually Art Sherman, who I mentioned earlier, who really wanted to focus on the future of technology and learn more about it, and also try to give back to the Berkshires, because OLLI is like hidden treasure. You have, about 1,400 members from all walks of life, many of them who spent their professional careers in New York or Boston and then, moved to the Berkshires to retire. And they bring a wealth of knowledge and connections and energy to the Berkshires. So the idea of kind of connecting them with economic development was really, really interesting. And so that's how it came about. But that's also the connection between the Office of Cultural Development and OLLI, is that a lot of my job, as I said, is, gardener, in that, with the city of Pittsfield, if an artist or an arts organization had a great idea, then I would help, connect them to people and make it happen. And that's actually true with OLLI too. The fabulous thing about OLLI is the programming is pretty much all developed by the members themselves.
Right.
And all of our instructors and speakers are volunteers. It's really just an incredible, again, ground up operation, and I love that about it.
Speaking of the programming, are you able to get ideas from your fellow OLLI, organizations and say, oh, that was a good one, we should do that here? Does that cross collaboration exist?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the nice thing. There's 125 OLLIs around the country, and we're all sort of independent of each other, so we share a lot of ideas and experiences and best practices with each other, and that's been really valuable. And then since the pandemic, especially, the New England OLLI directors meet once a month on Zoom, and that's been really nice. And that's because there's not many parallels for what I do with other people.
Right.
So it's always good to talk to other OLLI directors, because it's a pretty unique and really exciting program.
Well, thinking of just where we are in terms of the territory and the environment that's just concerning now. We were able to sort of go back to in person, but I feel like there's a shift that's happening right now where a lot of organizations are thinking about going back to virtual and doing different things. And for OLLI, what do you see with the months ahead? Do you see it's going to be more of the same? Maybe you've already established a protocol where maybe you already have your online courses and it's not really going to be a departure, but do you see the current environment affecting OLLI in any way?
Well, so in March 2020, we saw what happened, and we knew that our members would be affected more than others because older adults are at so much more risk of COVID. So we decided, and we had no idea if it was going to work or not, to move all of our programming online, teach ourselves Zoom because the staff didn't really know it, and then teach our instructors Zoom, and then teach our members Zoom. So and again, we didn't know if it would work or not, but I kind of had a feeling it would because we are a community of lifelong learners. So, and it was also necessity. And by teaching our members Zoom, they were able to Zoom with their family, and have online cocktail parties, and play, talk with their grandkids and stuff like that. So the good news is it did work, and we actually expanded our programming and did a lot more because in some ways it was easier with Zoom. You didn't have to arrange for physical spaces. You could have speakers who lived anywhere in the world. And our members came along with that. And we are actually one of the few OLLIs where our membership actually grew rather than went down during the pandemic. So then this summer, we... I can't remember exactly when in the summer because it matters because when Delta came and stuff. But we surveyed our members and said, so would you prefer all in person, all online, or a mix of online and in person when online's no longer necessary? And the great majority actually preferred a mix of online and in person because sometimes you want to stay in your pajamas all day, and sometimes you want to go out and be with other people, and to have that option. So that was great, and we were pleased with that because it was. It just gave us more flexibility. And then we also said, well, so wintertime, the winter semester of classes, and this year those begin January 18th. Here in New England, the weather's crappy, and a third of our members are lucky enough to go someplace else for the winter. So we're thinking maybe we'll do mostly online for the winter. What do you guys think? That's not exactly how it was stated in the survey, but and the majority of people said, yeah, that sounds great. So we had already, thank goodness, scheduled our winter semester almost completely online. And then that has, I think that is a good thing. We do have 2 in-person classes. One is actually, we've been working very hard on a seamless hybrid format where you can either attend in person or online, and the experience is not diminished for either group. And so we're doing the first class like that this January. But the online registration is 2 or 3 times higher than the in-person registration.
That's not surprising. I mean, online, it really does allow for the flexibility, and it allows for participation, especially if you're not able to come through the door. So I can certainly see that. When folks think about OLLI, what do you want? What are the first things that you want to come to mind?
Well, I want them to think about, feeding their curiosity and about community, because a lot of it is about meeting other people and working together and creativity. So I always say that, all of our programs are created by our members. So when I'm talking to members, I say, so if you have an interesting idea or if there's something that you would really like a class on, let us know, and, find the instructor or teach yourself so that you can teach others. And that's what a lot of members do. A lot of members, maybe their career was as a lawyer, but their undergraduate degree was in history. So now they teach history classes because that's their first love. So it's just such a great creative outlet.
Love it.
And so much fun.
Yeah.
But the fun has a very powerful, benefits.
Yeah.
It's good for your mind. It's good for your quality of life.
Yeah.
It's good for your health.
Yeah.
To be engaged, to be connected, and to be learning. All of those things are really good for people.
I agree. I mean, I feel like it defies what society thinks older people should be doing, right? Like, it's almost like when you get to a certain age, it's like no one wants to see you. You should just go somewhere, right? And we're all going to get there. We all are still the same thriving beings that we were throughout our lives. We're just in a new phase, and we still want to be engaged, right? You still want to have those things. So it's a real joy to know that we have a great organization like OLLI in our community.
Thank you.
In addition to your professional work, Megan, your community work, I think, has sort of occupied a sacred space in your life as well. You have been a consistent ally of so many people in the community. You have been a supporter. You have lent your physical space, office space, resources, and personal expertise to so many organizations and community initiatives. I know for my part, I can think of like Juneteenth. I think of the Lift Every Voice Festival. I mean, those are the ones that I remember trudging to the Lichtenstein. We would have those evening meetings.
Yeah.
And you would just open up those doors, and there was a table was set, and it was a sense of community. And we got stuff done.
Yeah, that's so nice to hear.
But
the importance of having that
seriously,
common table and that space. Thank you.
I mean, I was new to the community, but looking back now, I look at everyone who was around the table, and you opened those doors. You didn't have to do it, Megan. You could have. I mean, I don't know. People, I don't know. Maybe
Gone
they would
home and made dinner.
Exactly, but you opened up those doors and allow those conversations to happen so people could connect and do great things in the community. What was your driving force behind doing this? Because your day job was enough. You could have been like, I'm tired. I'm going home. Right? So what kept you going?
I think it's just wonderful to help make good things happen and help bring people together. And that's a joy to me. And one of the wonderful things about Pittsfield and the Berkshires is that an individual can make a difference. You're not in a huge city where, what one person might do might be lost in the hubbub and so forth. But I used to say it's human scaled here in the Berkshires. So you can help, make a difference, create something that reaches literally thousands of people and help move the needle on how people think about each other and think about their community and think about the world.
That's right.
So it's an honor and a wonderful thing to play a part in.
So I've shared this anecdote with you before, but I'll share it with our listeners as well. So when I first moved to the community, one of the things after having my daughter, I realized that, I love my children, but I also wanted to get involved. And I read in the paper about Pittsfield's 250th celebration, and I emailed someone, and I'm still trying to figure out who the email went to, but we connected. We were able to connect. And then I got an email back from you saying, okay, you spoke to the other members of the volunteer committee, and they would love to have you join the effort. And it culminated in me cutting cake in the atrium of the Berkshire Museum, and as part of this effort. And I realized at the time that you were someone who was so central. You were in so many different things. And I knew that, wow, you're someone that I definitely want to stay connected to, because you are so instrumental in so many things, Megan.
Oh.
And your energy. One of the things I told you about, you had boundless energy. You still do.
Only if I drink coffee.
Well, listen, Carolyn, I love to joke with Carolyn Valley because she always has a big tumbler of coffee. And I'm like, Carolyn, how do you sleep? But one of the things is that you've done so much, boundless energy, always smiling. Always smiling. I've never seen you grumpy. I'm not saying you're not grumpy. I'm just saying I've never seen it. So how do you juggle all of it? Professional, community, political work. How do you keep it all going?
The way anybody does, I think, and you can't. I guess you cannot do it all because my house is always a mess.
I understand.
So, you kind of choose what your priorities are, and most of my furniture is secondhand. So if the cat scratches it, it doesn't really matter and stuff. So
yes.
My partner always focuses on experiences.
Right.
It's like experiences are what's important. So that's really,
right.
I think my approach as well.
I agree with that, Megan. I think that, we sometimes hear the thing or the theme or the slogan of you can have it all. And I've long said, listen, you can have it all maybe in phases or chunks, but you're not going to have all of it. And I think it's that conscious decision to decide what do you want at this time? What are you going to put your energies toward and being okay with it?
Yeah.
I think we have to be okay with it, or else we'll live in a constant state of guilt and self-torment that we don't, quote unquote, have it all. And then we have to also think, have it all according to who?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So,
and you have to, and change is the only constant. So what you do one year might be different than what you do the next year because priorities change,
right,
depending on what's going on in the world, but also in your life.
Right.
So this past year, actually, my mom was very sick, and I actually, one of the benefits of working remotely was I was able to go to California several times, and I spent about 3 months there total last year, just to be there with her because she lives alone while she was recovering from surgery and stuff. And I was able to continue to work. So that was a nice thing. So that part, in that way, was also kind of an enforced downtime for me, because my focus was just being present with my mom, and doing my work with OLLI, and so
you were intentional. You were intentional about creating boundaries, and what needed to be in your space at that moment, and where you needed to set your energy and your focus on. And we have to make those decisions, and family comes high on that list. But I'm so grateful to BCC and to OLLI for, allowing me to do that and having that work out. Well, I also think too, when people know that you kind of bring the goods, they know. They know that even wherever you are, whether you're in California or wherever, you're still going to get it done. So it's not, there's probably no question. It's like, all right, handle what you need to handle. Well, I hope your mom is doing much better. I hope all is well with your family.
She is. She's working on a new OLLI class for her local OLLI, actually. So
that's
she's
right.
I saw her recently, and I took a picture of us, and she saw the picture, and she's like, "That's so weird. I look so healthy and happy." And I'm like, "Yeah, you do, Mom. You're a lot better." She's like, "Oh, well, that's good to see."
I like that picture of me.
So sometimes you just have to, you have to reflect back to people, whether it's a person or a community or an organization, and say, "Look, you're looking good. You are. Look."
Well, that's
things
important.
are not as bad as you think. There's
the power of the visual, right?
Definitely,
the power of the visual. Speaking of that kind of power, who or what inspires you?
Well, everybody that does something inspires me. You inspire me for doing this podcast. On top of everything, you have 3 kids and a very stressful job and so much else going on. So that's inspiring. Shirley Edgerton, who I've known now, for almost 20 years, inspires me for everything she's done. And also she inspires me because she doesn't give up. No. She is the Terminator. She is the... Shirley... In a good way. Sorry, Shirley.
Shirley is... She just keeps going and going. I'm like, Shirley, how are you doing it all? And I mean, literally, I mean, we were just texting. I mean, she gets it done, but she knows what she has to do and she does it.
Yeah.
And so that's not surprising that she's on your list.
Yeah. And then my OLLI members are so inspiring. They spend so much time and energy and thought into creating, wonderful programs for their own community, and all as a volunteer, and being creative about it and intentional and thoughtful. It's I'm always so delighted.
We had one of the OLLI members here, Alan Rubin.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yes, there's so many amazing OLLI members.
So many amazing. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you have this great. So we have your inspiration. We heard a little bit about, you mentioned gardening. And so would you say that gardening sort of is the way that you like to consume your spare time? If you have any, you just dedicate it all to gardening, or do you leave some space in there for some other things?
Gardening, yes. One of the benefits of gardening is you cannot look at your phone while you're gardening. It takes you away from the screen. Because I get a little attached to
I need to take a class with you, Megan, about gardening. I don't know. I tried a few potted plants, like just the potted, I don't know, like the container gardens and stuff like that. And they would flourish. And then I think there was seed that flew in from the wind, like it just like settled in the container. And I'm like, I don't think I should be eating that. It started as lettuce. When you keep it on the deck and it starts as lettuce, but then you start eating some foreign like weeds or something because like maybe it just starts to germinate from seeds that fly in.
Yes.
Yeah, so I probably need to maybe just take a class with you.
Well, I don't know about that. Right now, my garden doesn't look like a garden to most people because it's a pollinator garden.
What does that mean?
That means that it's full of natives. It means it's not a lawn because lawns are not good for the environment.
All right.
It means that there's all kinds of different plants and flowers. It means you don't cut it down at the end of the year so that it looks all neat, because the insects like to live like in the stalks, and the birds like to eat the seeds. So it doesn't look tidy.
Okay.
And I'm sure my neighbors are not thrilled with it. So I actually got these little signs that say, this is a pollinator garden.
They're like, is that what she's calling it?
So that's part of it, is reframing it. I reframed my front yard. It is a biodiversity preserve.
Yes. All right. Okay, I like that. I like that. Well, you're making your contribution to the environment. You're doing your part.
Yeah, I guess, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But and one of the other things that I only recently kind of put together in my head about working for the city of Pittsfield and then working for OLLI was, in both cases, I was working for something that was underappreciated and understood.
Yeah.
And the first was the city of Pittsfield itself, and the second was older people, encountering the prejudices against both of them. Because, with Pittsfield, certainly people within Pittsfield have some negativity, but then also outside the rest of the Berkshire County had some very virulent anti-Pittsfield sentiments, which is all another story.
Yeah.
So I realized, well, in both cases, it was about, taking something that was really wonderful, but that people had negative self-images about, and polishing the mirror and showing that actually Pittsfield is a beautiful place to live, full of wonderful people, and older adults are a huge asset with lots to give back and lots of life and energy and creativity in them. So I thought, that's kind of what I like to do.
I mean, since you put it that way, I think it does sum up what you have accomplished. I mean, you'll forever go down in history as the first, right? And I think we don't really think about ourselves as sort of like, history makers, right? But, I like to, in the Eagle, they will have sort of like those, the stories from years ago that they select. And you read about, this snapshot in time on a variety of topics or whatever was trending at the time. But when someone, whether it's Google years down the road, I don't know what the next thing will be, but when they look up your name, it will always be attached to that, to being the first. And I think that there's something to be said for being a part of a foundation, right? No one can ever take that away.
Sure. Yeah. And it's fun. I'm like you said, I think of myself as a creative instigator. So the making something bloom is a wonderful thing. Yeah. And then you have to hand it off to somebody else, to others. You pass it along to for it to continue. And that's a different skill. There's always the starters and then there's the continuers.
Succession.
So it's so it's a partnership.
Yeah, that's important because sometimes we want to hold on to things and we can't. It's not meant for us to.
Right.
You have to release it. You've done your work. The assignment is complete.
Yeah.
Then you have to move on.
Yeah.
What does 2022 have in store for Megan Whilden?
Gosh. I don't know. I mean, I'm always excited about it. The other thing I like to do is travel. I'm hoping that we'll be able to travel more.
Hopefully.
In some ways, what I want to do now is sort of improve what's there. So we've really grown OLLI. We have an incredible array of programming, and I really want to just make sure we're doing the best we possibly can.
Right.
So that is what I hope to focus on, and learn some new skills so I can, do what I do even better. That's always a lot of fun also.
And if people want to learn more about OLLI, where can they go? Now's the time for your plug, Megan.
Sure. So you can go to BerkshireOLLI.org. That's Berkshire, OLLI.org. And the important thing to remember is that while we're designed especially by and for people 50 years and better, anyone can join us and anyone can take a class. So you don't have to wait till you're 50. And we've had people as young as in their 20s join because our classes are so great. So they wanted to take them. Our winter semester of classes begins the week of January 18th, and all but two of them, well, actually all but one of them is online.
Okay.
And the nice thing about the online classes is you can attend them live, which is great because you can ask questions and there's interaction. But if you miss a class or you can't take it at that time because you're working or something, we'll send you the recording afterwards so you can then watch it on demand.
Excellent. Megan, it's been great going down memory lane with you. And I hope 2022 is a year that just creates more certainty in so many ways. And I hope it brings you all that you want and hope for. And I just want to thank you for a really great conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Roberta.
All right, everyone. You've been listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM, Pittsfield, with Roberta McCulloch-Dews of the Mayor's Office in the city of Pittsfield. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great day.
What is One Berkshire? We're the voice of the business community, promoting the region and supporting local business. How do we do it? Through marketing, networking, sponsorships, and advocacy. Whether it's promotion to travelers and second homeowners, or opportunities to network with your neighbors and raise your profile, we've got you covered. So join today. Visit oneberkshire.com. That's the number 1, berkshire.com.
The preceding public service announcement courtesy of WTBR in Lee Bank. Hi, This is Kevin Cahill inviting you to join me on St. Patrick's Day as WTBR brings you a marathon of my show, Sunday Sounds of Ireland. Beginning at 10 a.m. on March 17th, I am thrilled to bring you 8 hours of the best of Irish music. Enjoy 8 hours of Irish music beginning at 10 a.m. on 89.7 WTBR-FM. Support for this program comes from Dwyer Funeral Home, Patrick's Pub, and Greylock Federal Credit Union.